Did you know that the Sistine Chapel ceiling was the result of rivalry and sabotage? Hello, and welcome to Spilling the Tea on Art History. My name is Sherry Meinberg, and I'm an art historian. On this channel, we'll be deep diving into the rumors, intrigue, and scandals that can be found throughout the art world. We will be looking at famous works of art, but my focus will be more on the artist's stories and not on the works themselves. If you want more information on any of the works of art that I'll be mentioning today, I've included some links below to some amazing channels that do a great job going into the meaning and symbolism of the pieces. And now, back to today's tea, where we're going to be looking at how the rivalry between Michelangelo, Bramante, and Raphael resulted in art history's most impressive and most important works of art, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. The Italian High Renaissance is well known for some big players in the art world, and one could argue that there's no one bigger than this guy. Oh, sorry, this guy. Michelangelo Buonarroti was one of the most accomplished sculptors of the time. And note that I said sculptor, and think about it. Besides the Sistine Chapel ceiling, name one other painting by Michelangelo off the top of your head, because they're out there. But let's be honest, when you think of Michelangelo, you think of sculptures, like the Pietà, which he finished by the time he was 24. Or this. Michelangelo's David was a masterpiece, cut from a single block of flawed marble that other sculptors wouldn't touch, including Antonio Rossellino, who instantly backed out of the commission, citing the marble's poor quality. But at age 28, Michelangelo proved that he had the artistic chops to pull off the impossible when David was unveiled in Florence. So the question is, how did a master sculptor who strongly believed that sculpture was a higher form of art than painting, end up getting roped into one of the largest painting projects at the time? Well, to answer that, we need to look at the other characters in our story. This is Pope Julius II. Pope Julius was a huge patron of the arts, and having seen both the Pietà and David, he summoned Michelangelo to Rome with a special commission to create 40 statues for his personal tomb. But wait, where does the Sistine Chapel fit in? This, my friends, is where rivalry and sabotage come into play. So let's set the stage. Michelangelo excitedly accepts this important and lucrative commission, doing what he does best: sculpting. He spends several months in Rome creating a design that Pope Julius approves of, and then heads out to acquire the needed marble and other tools to start the project. It looks like everything's going to plan. So, what happened? This guy happened. This is Donato Bramante, Renaissance architect responsible for some of the most amazing buildings of the time. At the same time that Pope Julius had commissioned Michelangelo to do his tomb, he also hired Bramante to design the new St. Peter's Basilica, since the old building had fallen into such disrepair. Bramante was friends and mentor to this dude. What? No. This guy. This is Raffaello Sanza d'Urbino, otherwise known as Raphael, an up-and-coming painter who Bramante was trying to elevate and who was heavily influenced by Leonardo da Vinci. It's at this point in the story where I have to restrain myself from going down the rabbit hole that is the rivalry between Michelangelo and da Vinci. That juicy tidbit is for another day, but let's just say that this is a complete myth. Now, where were we before I derailed this a bit? Oh yeah. So, whether warranted or not, there was already some animosity between Michelangelo and Raphael due to Raphael's relationship with da Vinci, and Bramante was about to add fuel to that fire. Remember, Michelangelo has left Rome, Bramante is now working on the designs for the new St. Peter's Basilica, and Raphael has just been given a commission to create frescoes for the Pope's private library, which includes this one, the School of Athens. It didn't take long for Bramante to decide that Michelangelo needed to be taken down a notch or two, and he came up with an idea that did that as well as shine a spotlight on Raphael. So Bramante starts talking to the Pope, pretty much telling Julius that it's bad luck to be working on a tomb while Julius is still alive, and it would be better if the project was canceled for the time being. Michelangelo could, paint the ceiling of the new Sistine Chapel instead. Bramante knows that Michelangelo cannot refuse a commission from the Pope, and he also knows that Michelangelo hasn't truly painted anything of significance since around the age of 14, so he's really out of practice. Bramante's hope is that Michelangelo would fail and give up on the project, or mess it up so badly that someone else would have to come in and fix it, and that someone, in Bramante's mind, was Raphael. If Raphael could do what Michelangelo couldn't, it would prove that Raphael was the better artist, elevating him and humiliating Michelangelo in the process. A win-win in the eyes of Bramante. So, the Pope calls Michelangelo back to Rome and tells him the exciting news. The tomb project is canceled, and he's now going to fresco the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo, however, is devastated, and he tries to refuse the commission, even saying to the Pope that Raphael, his rival, would be a better artist for the job. But the Pope insists, and Michelangelo reluctantly agrees, leaving the meeting with the Pope distraught and in tears. Famed Renaissance art historian Giorgio Vasari, and when I say Renaissance art historian, I'm not talking about some dude who wrote an art history book 20 years ago. Giorgio Vasari was a contemporary of Bramante, Michelangelo, and Raphael, and was writing about their lives in real time. Well, he had this to say on the matter. Bramante and the other rivals of Michelangelo, thinking they should thus detach him from his sculpture, in which they saw he was perfect, and throw him into despair, they, being convinced that by compelling him to paint in fresco, they should also bring him to exhibit works of less perfection, he having but little experience in that branch of art, and thus proving himself inferior to Raphael. This was a great and difficult labor, and our artist, aware of his own inexperience, did all he could to excuse himself from undertaking the work, proposing at the same time that it should be confided to Raphael. But the more he refused, the more Pope Julius insisted. Impetuous in all of his desires, and stimulated by the competitors of Michelangelo, more especially by Bramante, he was on point to make a quarrel with our artist when the latter, finding His Holiness determined, resolved to accept the task. But this is Michelangelo, the literal GOAT of the Renaissance artists, and Bramante's sabotage plan backfires in his face. The original concept of the chapel's ceiling was to create portraits of the 12 apostles and the spandrels, and the chapel's vaulted ceiling would be frescoed to resemble a blue sky with gold stars. But Michelangelo likes to go big, and so he goes back to the Pope and requests that he be allowed to broaden the theme. And Julius was like, "Sure, my man, do whatever you want." So Michelangelo ditches the portrait idea for various reasons and instead creates a central focus of 9 scenes from Genesis, surrounded by the supporting characters of angels, prophets, and the ancestors of Jesus. The scale of this project is huge. It takes Michelangelo 4 years to finish the ceiling, and in that time he has to teach himself perspective, foreshortening, how to do large frescoes, and how to do large frescoes on a curved surface. Also, he pretty much did all the work himself. Of the experience, Vasari wrote, "He worked with great inconvenience to himself, having to labor with his face turned upwards and injuring his eyes so much in the process of the work that he could neither read letters nor examine drawings for several months afterwards, except in the same attitude of looking upwards." There is an urban myth. No, not Pope Urban. There's a myth that Bramante and Raphael had not so secretly hoped that Michelangelo would, in the course of painting the ceiling, fall off the high scaffolding and die. I was unable to confirm this. However, there is a passage in Vasari's biography on the artist, while not confirming the rumors, does point to the idea that Michelangelo did not trust Bramante, who, as an architect, had been charged with creating the scaffolding, which may be the root of the rumor. The Pope then ordered Bramante to prepare the scaffolding, which the latter suspended by ropes, perforating the ceiling for that purpose. Seeing this, Michelangelo inquired of the architect how the holes thus made were to be filled when the painting should be completed, to which Bramante replied that they would think about that when the time came, and that it could not be done otherwise. But Michelangelo, perceiving that the architect was either incapable or unfriendly towards himself, went at once to the Pope, whom he assured that such a scaffolding was not the proper one, adding that Bramante did not know how to construct it. And Julius, in the presence of Bramante, replied that Michelangelo might construct it himself after his own fashion. In the end, the ceiling was a triumph, and instead of humiliating Michelangelo, Bramante elevated him. Michelangelo was now both a master sculptor and a master at fresco paintings. But Michelangelo was about to get the final laugh. He was about to become a master architect. I had mentioned earlier that Bramante had been commissioned to be the lead architect on St. Peter's Basilica. Well, 2 years after Michelangelo completed the ceiling, Bramante dies. So now a new architect was needed for the basilica, and that job went to Raphael. But then, in 1520, Raphael also dies. After another 20 years, a few more architects, as well as a few more popes, and the sacking of Rome, all tea-worthy stories in their own right, the job was finally given to Michelangelo by Pope Paul III. So, if you're in Rome and have a chance to visit the Sistine Chapel and St. Peter's Basilica, it's not just Bramante or Raphael's designs you're marveling at, it's also Michelangelo's. Now, I bet you're wondering what happened to Michelangelo's first commission and the tomb of Pope Julius II. I guess that's tea for another day. I hope you've enjoyed spilling the tea on art history with me. If you want more art history tea, I'll be brewing up new content every other Wednesday. So please hit those like and subscribe buttons for those updates, as well as helping me grow the channel. Thank you so much for your support, and I look forward to spilling the tea on art history with you again soon.